Welcome back to another episode of the Easy Button Real Estate Podcast with myself and Tucker Mariu. And we've gone through a few brand changes recently, and we've been Easy Button leads for 6 years now, 5 years now. And you guys probably very temporarily saw Easy Button Investor as our name, and then back to Easy Button leads, and now to Easy Button Real Estate. We've been trying to find what umbrella encompasses all that we do and all we're trying to create. And so we finally ended up on Easy Button Real Estate after a long journey, which I think encompasses everything we want to do. So, in today's show, you guys, as we get into it, we're going to dive deep into a lot of one of the main questions we could ask. One of the what our thoughts and opinions are on what's happening out there in the world of off market real estate when it comes to regulations and licensing and disclosures, and how that's getting increasingly more common across the country. And then we'll also get into what we think the opportunities are right now. But before we do all of that, Tucker, we haven't recorded in a few weeks. Give us a quick, not a quick or medium length synopsis on your journey through the past 2 weeks since we haven't been on the mic.
I've had a lot going on here in Southwest Florida. We've got a couple of projects that we're doing for other people, construction projects, backyard renovations. We'll call it, remember that show is like Backyard Makeover or whatever. Anyway, we've got a couple sets of friends here that we've been doing backyard makeovers for, and so like basically take almost like a dirt backyard with a crummy looking pool and then turn it into something amazing. So we're finishing up one of those. We're actually doing one of those on my own yard. Not that it was that bad to start with, but kind of redoing the back of that. And then we're going to be tearing down that house that's been a little bit of a saga to kind of get there, but we're going to tear that house down on Monday for our most expensive spec new construction that we're going to be starting as soon as that's torn down. So a lot of stuff going on. And the last weekend, of course, was Memorial Day weekend, which is pretty cool. It's big boating community here, as you know, every time you come here, or some of the times we've gone out on a boat, but we went on a boat with some friends. We actually boated to the hotel, and we stayed in this hotel that was right on the water. And then we boated to a place called Cabbage Key and a bunch of other cool bars, North Captiva Island. You basically go bar hopping on a boat, which is pretty fun.
That's so
And
so sick.
and now that the water is like bathwater warm here, which locals like it in the 80s, mid 80s or so. It's awesome. So it was sunny all weekend. We boated around, went to some really cool places. Other than the fact that I got some sort of weird sickness once I got back for obviously, from our company meeting on Tuesday. But other than that, it was fantastic. So it's been a busy week or last couple of weeks, but I'm excited to get back on the microphone and chat a little bit here. But what about you? Anything extra exciting? I know you've been bouncing around the world too.
Yeah, we were at our condo in Maui for a few weeks, and pretty normal workflow out there. But I would say I dominated the 70 EU pickleball league out there. Wreaked absolute havoc on the Whaler timeshare pickleball community, and I came home undefeated from that. So that's big, big ego boost for me. Played some golf, worked. Yeah, it was good. I mean, I when I travel, I'm usually by day four. We were gone 2 weeks. Usually by day four, I'm like ready to come home. Um, and I'm excited before then. And usually by day four, I like had enough of the vacation, and then I kind of get back to a normal schedule. But it's good. I like Maui's like a second home. I like it a lot. So all is fun. A lot of exciting things at Easy Button, which, as you guys know, is my out there and the listen to the podcast is my full time gig. So a lot of good work with the team the past 2 weeks through the rebrand we've done, and making sure we're aligning with our clients, which we'll continue to talk more and more about as we release more shows. But yeah, no, everything is rolling, and I built a strong enough brand throughout the years in Seattle through HelloPad that probably had 4 or 5 just really good deals sent to me last week that people couldn't sell, that I'm helping put together for them too. So that was cool. We've talked about branding on the show and the power of it, and those kind of things that seem to keep trickling in just because of work I did years ago on branding my business HelloPad, and obviously myself. So that's been cool as well.
Yeah, well, that's what do they call that? Brand equity, right? And relationship
Mhm.
building. A little bit of both.
Yeah. Yeah, so, all good things, but yeah, we're moving the show. I think we start with some of the actual just factual things that have already happened when it comes to the land of kinda oversight, regulation, and disclosures, and licensing that's been taking place. I spent about an hour on this yesterday on our community call with a lot of our clients, and that was one of the main questions, and just a very clear, um, kind of frame for this. Tucker and I are not attorneys. We are not, we're not going to give you all factual. We're going to read some facts, but most of this is going to be opinion and thought. And I'm excited to hear Tucker's thought on this because he's been through a few market cycles, and gonna give his overview on why this is happening, where it's headed. At least, and again, this is all speculation, so don't come back to us in a year and be like, "Oh, I did this because Colin Tucker speculated on I do licensing here." But the one thing I'll start with, there's already some states, Pennsylvania being one of them, where you have to be licensed.
And we're talking about wholesaling,
And
right? So that
yeah,
everybody
but
understands.
well,
Yeah.
the wholesale,
Yeah.
yeah, correct, yes. So in Pennsylvania, but I think that's gonna spread across just anyone that's going direct to seller, because that's really where the issue is sellers being put under contract and then being tied up and then price drop at the last minute, and flippers do that, developers do that. There's a few developers I know in Seattle that have got a really bad name for themselves because they put in a 120-day close on something, and they just beat them up for 120 days until they fold into where they want them. So let's start with this question though, for you, Tucker, is, with Pennsylvania already being you need a license to wholesale and to move deals that way, do you think that's going to become, most states that do require that license with time? Or where do you think that's headed, on the you have to have a real estate license or wholesale side of things?
I mean, I think in general, again, this is in general. So if you're a realtor out there, don't, go having a conniption fit here when I say this, but most realtors kind of want like a nanny state type environment for not only their industry, but the real estate industry as a whole, right? They feel like, without the proper ethics in place, that nothing can operate the way it should. And to some extent, they're correct. In another way, they take that way too far a lot of times as well in terms of like what they can and can't give advice on, and it basically, I think it limits their value a lot of the times to clients and just to anyone asking questions. But I think there's gonna be a continued push from that world, to create licensing that kinda bleeds over into our world. So if you are engaging with, off-market real estate sellers or sellers of real estate off market, they're gonna wanna make sure that you're licensed, and supposedly if you have a license, then you're safe to talk to and you're not gonna screw somebody over, right? That's basically what they're trying to say. So I think it's gonna continue to move forward. I think it'll be state by state. I think it'll be a little different. I mean, you've got a few more examples we can run through, but there definitely are, some of the states have the pitchfork out and they're leading the charge. I think there'll be a few that probably, takes a long time to make it happen if it does at all. But I would say there's definitely a lot that are gonna kind of follow the lead here. I know there's been some crazy stuff came out about Washington too, we mentioned in one of the previous shows. So that's, another one, but I'll throw it back to you, and maybe you've got another example or your thoughts as well.
So I guess there's kind of 3 tiers already happening. I'm reading this off. You have the licensing piece. You have the like, states like Pennsylvania, also states like, Oklahoma and Illinois, where you have to be licensed to wholesale. Then you have states that are more on the disclosure side. They're really heavy in enforcing on that, like Texas, California, and a few others. So I think there's some states that are saying you have to be licensed, and some states that are saying you have to be, just over disclose it. I think what it's going to come down to is, as the states that require you to be licensed and also over disclose your intent, and they start enforcing that, I think those attorney general offices are going to start getting a lot less complaints from homeowners. And I think what's going to happen is they're going to get on the phone and tell their buddy who's a attorney general somewhere else, and because the amount of and I know this because we got into a spiff with a seller at one point, and they threatened to go to the attorney general. Nothing we did wrong; it's just what they did. And our attorney told us, he's like, when I try to get on that office on the phone, they're just flooded with these kind of complaints. So I think that's going to continue to be the case, and I think there'll be some kind of licensing eventually in most states required. And I'm not sure if that's like a tiered licensing system, where it's going to be the wholesale license is going to be something slightly different, or they're just going to add under the definition of a broker also wholesaling. But I think most states will eventually go that way, and we'll get to a point where it's pretty regulated in that sense. And I think there's pros and cons to that. I'm kind of anti-regulation at that level, and I think a lot of this is because a lot of the realtor associations are also putting a lot of pressure on trying to make it easier for realtors to do their jobs like they always do. I think there's pros and cons. I think the pros are that it's going to get rid of a lot of bad actors who just don't want to go get licensed because they don't want people to know who they are because they're doing very shady things. I think the cons of that are one of the coolest things to me about wholesaling has always been that it gives someone a very easy barrier to entry to real estate. And then oftentimes they go on to build a really cool career. So that's a con to me because I think a lot of people will be scared off because a real estate license is scary. They don't know it's an online test, and then you go in and take it. They don't know how relatively simple it is. So that's kind of that was my answer yesterday. Was
What do you
I
think
think it'll be
Well, sorry to cut you off, but what do you think
very good.
about, maybe here's a positive way to look at it, right? Like this may be a way that it kind of pushes people within our industry to kind of create a better overall business. So like, I
Yes.
believe your intent, for them to want you to over disclose or to be licensed, your intent has to be wholesaling, which means you're never actually intending to own the real estate in any way, shape, or form, right? So, the other option is as you have, more relationships and the ability to get lines of credit or transactional funding type partnerships, private money, I think there might be a lot more double closings that
Yep.
happen because, that was a thing that had to happen. So when people were flipping REOs back in the day, right? Or short sales for that matter, it would say specifically in the short sale approval letter that XYZ entity is the only entity that it can close in that name, right?
Yep.
And if you didn't close in that name, sometimes you'd have to restart all the negotiations. Sometimes they could change it, and then you'd get paid on the side or whatever people did. But if that was the case, then to solve that problem, and REOs would be the same way. If the asset manager for those banks said, okay, we'll take a 40% discount off list, but it has to close in the name of this entity that wrote the offer, period, the end, right? And so the way around that is people just did a lot of double closings, right? They'd close it with A to B money, and then they'd sell it, and then C would bring in the money for the B to C transaction, right? So it's not like it can't be done. People did it all the time back during the real estate crash, or the Great Recession or whatever you want to call it. So that's a workaround if like this gets too cumbersome in terms of like the licensing, the pain in the ass, and the over disclosure. Like,
Yep.
because if you get to a point with the over disclosure where you're basically shooting yourself in the foot, it may become challenging to kind of explain away all of it and do it correctly. And so if that's the case, then I just feel like, yeah, I'm buying it. But that if you buy it, whatever you do with it after that's your business, right? So
Yep.
that's kind of how I would go at this. If I was kind of newer to wholesaling and I saw this kind of coming on the horizon, it's not the end of the world by any means. It's just you just kind of pivot a little bit. But by doing that, you actually build a better business because now you have more funding, capability at your fingertips, more funding relationships. And let's face it, you're in real estate, so you should have those relationships eventually.
Yep.
Like it's a necessary component if you want to grow. Um, so I don't think it's all bad, really.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking is, and I've been thinking through this, is I think it's going to affect the way we can market to sellers eventually. Like when you look at like the finance world, for example, like the amount of hoops they have to jump through in terms of the marketing they can do. Like my wife owns a Medicare business and she can't go initiate a conversation with someone about Medicare. They have to come to her. She can host an event or a luncheon and they can come and listen to her talk and then they can reach out to her, but they have to initiate the conversation. And I don't think it'll go to that extent, but I think this is going to roll because a lot of the issue I think is, let's say I'm a wholesaler. I'm 6 months into the business. I've done 4 deals and I'm sending out mass text messages like a lot of people do, which again, I'm not a big proponent of because you get yourself in trouble there. And I get someone and I have them sign a contract for 300 grand. I tell them that I just need a few contractors to come through the house. I tell them that I'm a real investor. I'm a real buyer. And you start making all these claims that are simply not true. And then what happens along the way, they just try to price drop them over and over again. I think they're going to eventually, there's going to come a point where the marketing piece gets changes slightly as well in terms of the wording, the messaging that you can use with sellers across your website, across the conversations you have. So that's another piece that I think will be affected. But to your point, I think if you guys are listening to this and you plan to be in real estate as a career for your career and you really care, you build meaningful relationships, like this kind of stuff isn't going to be what takes you out of business. All right. You're not going to go out of business because you have to get an extra license or you have to slightly disclose something differently. Stuff's always changing contractually. We've been in the telemarketing game for a long time and regulations are always changing there that we have to follow. right? That's just part of business. So if you're in this for the long haul, I think this actually sets you up in a good way because one, it's going to force you to kind of legitimize your business. You're gonna with a license, you become a full suite investor where you can do a lot more. And also it eliminates a lot of bad actors. And there's a lot of people that run pretty much just scam shops and they call them real estate companies. So that's I guess my overarching thoughts. Do you think that kind of the marketing piece will change at all given that context? Or you think it'll kind of just be something that's
No,
stays the Wild
I
West?
think it'll stay. I think anything that creates inbound calls, nothing's gonna change, right? You can send out whatever you want for the most part. Um, unless, of course, now you're a licensed agent, and then when you're a licensed agent, then you have to sometimes follow the bullshit that they will or will not allow them to put in stuff. So, I personally wouldn't want to be the licensed agent. Maybe you have a licensed agent that works, with your company, that, then can sell your stuff too. So you have in-house real estate to list and sell anything that you take down or, you buy and then retail or buy and wholesale, whatever. Um, but I don't think it's gonna change much on creating the inbound calls, and especially, again, if your intent or your ability, right? The intent, it's always gonna be tough to prove though too, right? But if your intent is to actually buy it, not to renovate it, but to buy it and then resell it same day or whatever, then what does it matter? If your intent is to buy it or you have the ability to buy it, which are kind of the same thing, right? At the end of the day, I think you can still do whatever you want because you're just trying to attract a seller of a piece of real estate that you're interested in actually owning, whether it be for a minute or whether it be for a year or 2 years or 10 years, right? Doesn't matter. You have the desire to own it at a certain price. And so, uh, I don't see how, that any of that marketing would change. I mean, having looked at hundreds, maybe even thousands of marketing pieces, over the last 10 years, I mean, every one of them has a varying degree of "I want to buy your property," right? So, if
Yep.
that's a true statement, however you phrase that, I don't see how somebody could tell you not to say that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more like in, like, Washington, for example, it's a Class B felony to intentionally market to a owner-occupied pre-foreclosure, and so they've already done things to protect that person in regards to if you do it on accident and they can't prove intent, I don't think it's the same thing, but if they can prove that you pulled a list of pre-foreclosures and you knew that it was owner-occupied and you intentionally marketed to them, it's a Class B felony in the state of Washington. And so I think there's gonna be some stuff like that that comes out
Sounds like a
around
West Coast policy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, the person who needs the service the most can be
Yeah,
marketed to,
and at
right?
the end of the day, they're probably gonna need a short sale done and, but whatever. I mean, there's not that many, of those types of pre-foreclosures that have a lot of equity in them that you can buy as a pre-foreclosure and make money. Most of them go back to auction or they have to have some sort of a short sale done. I mean, that's why they're in pre-foreclosure. It's not like back in the day where people had like a $20,000 mortgage on a $180,000 house and they let it go to foreclosure. It's like that's like the needle in the haystack, like virtually never
Yeah,
happens. But
but seller finance subject
yeah,
to
yeah, yes.
inky winky.
Sub to that one, bring it current, sub to it, give them 5 grand and, that's what they're trying to prevent, but it's like they make these rules, like that sounds like a rule they made based off of this never land, um, possibility or very rare possibility, which is why I say it sounds like a West Coast policy, but
Well, we'll pivot, you guys. I mean, that conversation, obviously, there's a million thought tracks we could go down and keep making things up that we may or may not come true just because it's all speculation. I think what we talked about is there's a good chance that does happen, but again, we don't have a crystal ball, and it could go the other way. Like you just don't know the downstream effects of the stuff that's happening right now, and our government's messy and how they do things,
you just gotta
state,
pivot though.
local,
It's
federal.
just it's
Yeah,
just a
so
pivot. I mean,
you
at
just
the end of the day,
gotta stay
it's just
fluid.
yeah, so if
Yeah.
you just take a small pivot, it's not gonna change how you do business, it'll just it's like I can't build a house without a license, right? So, or I can't even work on a house without a license or getting a permit. So it's like, what's so bad about having to get, something, anything, to be able to kind of orchestrate, off market sales? I don't think it's a huge deal. I really don't. I think people kind of blow it
No.
out of context.
Let's transition to where again, there's kind of 2 themes I get right now because 'cause we're in a funky market. or where's the opportunity right now? And we already covered the first topic, but where do you think right now, sitting in, end of May, beginning of June, end of second quarter 2025, the opportunity is right now for the wholesaler, flipper, developer, on market, off market? I have some thoughts here, but give the mic to you first on where you think opportunity zones are right now for people who are looking to execute I guess, given current market conditions, a somewhat good investment strategy.
I would say, it's multifaceted, but just to kind of, go to the simplest version first. A lot of markets I've been watching, the amount of inventory that's out there right now, right? And I think pending home sales, the data came out yesterday from when we recorded this, and it came out for April. It's always trailing data, but it was god awful, and way worse than what was expected. Which honestly, it wasn't worse than what I expected. But you got mortgage rates that were up over 7% again, which kind of stalls out a lot of buying. And so then all that does is really increase the amount of inventory that's on the market. And so we've gotten into this period now where inventory has continued to build in certain sections of the country, because interest rates have sustained, at 6.75 or 7% or above, for a while now. And so as you get that glut of inventory on the market, you get a lot more people that are willing to, sell their house, at a sale price or extreme sale price, depending on condition, right? And that kind of leads me to my next topic is, at the worse the condition of the home, usually the bigger the discount people will take. But even it's that discount is magnified when you get into a market situation where everybody thinks that it's really difficult to sell a house to begin with, even a retail house. So we're going to get to this point in time. And I've always referred to this as kind of it's the absolute bottom of the market, or the best time on the buying side, where you'll start to see it transition just a little bit back to like just a kind of a flat, stable market. It won't be getting better, but flat and stable. But a lot of the people that you'll be talking to will still think it's not good and it's falling. And so those are the best buy times. So that then on the other end, you sell, and once the layman recognizes that it started to turn around, right, and you grab that extra value that, you're able to get by doing that. But so I'd say anything like, fixer related is a fantastic time to get a great price on it. Anything development related, you can get great buys on stuff for bigger development stuff. And even like tear down stuff like we do right now is a fantastic time to get, higher end, tear down properties, to then, ultimately build and sell out in what will be a different market than today. So
Yep.
this is my favorite time to go looking to buy, because I know that, the bottom it's somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is, but, depending on your length of project, you're going to be selling in very likely a better market than what we're in right now in a lot of the parts of the country.
Yeah, I think I talked about this briefly on a previous show. I was in Arizona a few weeks ago with Jimmy, and I was asking him because he has 16 or 17 higher end flips going on right now. Kind of his niche now is a little higher end, and I was asking him like, what, out of those 16 or 17, how many came from on market or off market, and he's just ripping deals off the MLS that have been sitting for 90 days or longer, and they're just sending offers, and they're offering list price and getting deals done. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for you guys out there, whether you're wholesaling, flipping, or whatever. I know I spoke with last week, a new client of ours, a wholesaler in Texas, who was working with one of the hedge funds who allows him to wholesale them deals off the MLS. And so he's going on the MLS deals that have been sitting 90 days or longer, firing off offers 30 grand below list price, signing 5% of those, and then wholesaling them for, you know, 20 grand off of list price, 10 grand off of list price, and making 10, 20 grand a pop. And so I think there's definitely, obviously we're big on off market. I think there's obviously a lot of off market opportunity right now too. And I think the reality is that, I pulled up some stats here. Bank of America said 60% of their potential buyers who have pre-approvals right now are communicating a sentiment of they're scared to go through with the purchase. So a lot of sellers that want to sell are sitting there, and on market and off market. So I think that, like the Tucker's point, there's a real opportunity if you're a host, whatever you're doing, to go and negotiate deals right now. And if you have the confidence to be accurate in resale value, what I wouldn't do is go use comps from 6 months ago or even 3 months ago and try to scrape by on a deal where you think you're gonna make 50 grand because that can go the wrong way, right? I know a lot of people that they were operating in a world for so long where they could just go buy a house, sit on it for 4 months and make 70 grand because of inflation. And you look at even like San Diego, right? I have a stat which is one of the strongest appreciation markets in the country. Year over year, April 24 to 25, only an average less than 1% of appreciation
Mhm.
on average. So you don't
If you
have that
account for
same game
inflation,
of
you're negative really on your value of your
yeah,
home, right?
exactly.
So
Yeah. So you don't have that same game, and that'll come back. That's a cycle, right? You don't have that same game right now, so you really have to buy with true value add, where you can build equity with what you do. So, I would kinda second what he said, and that's why I think that. So I think it's a great time right now. If you guys are out there building a real business, you're you're sinking in deeper, you're sinking your teeth in, you're building a business right now. As things get better, it's gonna be a great opportunity for you guys if you have team, if you have an operating business, because as soon as this thing turns I think as soon as rates come back into the mid, low 5s, whenever that is when things will somewhat go back to normal
mhm.
because people are so far removed now from the 2s and 3s.
Yeah, I just think that's anything 6 and 3 quarters, if they see a 7 handle on it, forget it, for
Yeah.
the most part.
Yeah, forget it.
There's
Yeah.
just, but there will be a significant amount of buyer and transition activity that happens, right? From, sideways buying or, moving up, moving down, whatever it is. There's gonna be a glut of that is kind of like it's been held up for a while, right? So when rates do go back down to, let's just call it a palatable level, right? Not even like great, but just people can be like, okay, it's not terrible. It's not great like it was, but it's not terrible. You're gonna have all this backed up demand of people that just kind of were sitting on their hands. And so I think when it runs back, it'll run back really quick. I don't know that necessarily means prices are gonna run up, but there'll be a lot of buyer activity in the market in a very short amount of time. And so that's the moment in time that I'm talking about, that if you're selling into some point of that, you're selling in a completely different market than you're buying, and it's a much better market, right? And so those are usually, and historically, where we've made the fattest spreads. I mean, for example, one of the best profit projects that we had in Portland before we left is, when COVID hit, right? At the very beginning, real estate didn't go crazy at the beginning. It went crazy on the backside, right? The beginning, everybody was like, yeah, button down the hatches, not gonna spend anything. It just started. And so we sold a house at the beginning of COVID, and we probably took, a 10% or so haircut, maybe even 15% less than what we would have gotten, pre-COVID. But then right after that, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go buy a piece of dirt. Well, it was a tear down, but I went and bought a tear down that ended up being a screaming deal, and it was the most expensive house that we sold, on the other end, our whole time in Portland, right? So, and but we sold it on the back side of COVID, where real estate was, booming again, and we bought it in a, questionable time, we'll call it, right? It wasn't even like a super depressed time, but it was just a questionable time. And so I feel like right now we're not in a super depressed time, but we're in a questionable time in terms of like when will rates come back down, and it's suppressed buyer activity, and ultimately it's pushing prices down in a lot of areas, because of that.
Yeah, I like that because it's true. I remember in 2020 and that it was like April, May, where everything just froze and people wouldn't go to open houses. It was just an absolute mess. And then what was it like June, July, August? They started printing money like crazy again. And man, if that happens again, it's a great time to own any real estate. But we'll wrap the show there on that thought you guys today. Thanks for sticking around for another episode of the Easy Button and Real Estate podcast. Now with our new name. Super important show. I think if you got a lot of this is speculation, but I think it's based on what we're hearing and seeing real time out in the real estate world. As always, no matter where you listen to this podcast, Spotify, Apple, wherever else, leave us a review. We only grow through you guys telling your friends, family, coworkers about the show. And until next time, you're only one deal away.